My husband finally cut ties with his toxic mom and sister after they demanded we give up our house for my jobless sister-in-law and her family. My in-laws have a very toxic connection with my spouse, and it is beginning to ruin my life. Growing up, my husband was my favorite, the golden child, and my mother-in-law was very close to him. Jacob has informed me that because his father was so busy at work, he and his mother spent a lot of time together. However, I've noticed that his sister Sarah is not treated equally by my mother-in-law. Although I am confident that my mother-in-law loves both of her children, I have repeatedly observed that she prioritizes my husband. I'm sure Sarah felt the same way growing up, which is why my husband has always attempted to fill the void by being a kind elder brother to her and always being there for her. But the truth is that Sarah and my mother-in-law would sometimes behave in such a ridiculous manner that it crossed the line. For example, when we initially started dating, Jacob, a recent college graduate, and my in-laws, including Sarah, shared a house. My in-laws had offered my husband a totally own level so that he could have his own privacy and welcome whomever he pleased. This is why he would occasionally invite me to his home to spend the night with him. However, several times in the morning, Sarah would storm into our room while we were asleep without knocking. As you may guess, we were not always properly dressed, but she would act as if everything was normal and begin talking to Jacob about utterly random topics. This was very strange for me because I was uncomfortable with her seeing me in my lingerie. Before anyone points out, I absolutely understand that Jacob was living with his family at the time, so I should have expected this, but is knocking on the door before entering really that much to ask? I suppose siblings can be quite close, but she and I didn't know each other very well when Jacob and I first started dating, so I thought it was really rude. Naturally, I spoke with Jacob about it and informed him that I would not be going over unless he installed a lock on his door. He agreed. But as you can guess, Sarah, who attempted to storm into the room the next morning but was unsuccessful, began ranting at us about why the door was locked. She began jiggling and hammering on the door, begging her brother to let her in. Jacob eventually let her in, and she stormed into the room, asking why he had set the lock in the first place. When she recognized me, she pointed to me and began ranting at him, asking if it was because of this skank. I was astonished by how harsh and insulting she sounded. Jacob told Sarah that he wanted to install the door lock, but Sarah was not convinced. She angrily informed him that they were siblings and should not keep any secrets between them. Jacob told her that he had no secrets and that he had put the lock so she wouldn't barge in when we were asleep, which was quite disturbing. Sarah violently flipped her head towards me and exclaimed that it was all my fault, saying that I was interfering with her and her brother. This was too much for me, as I am generally non-confrontational, so I excused myself to visit the restroom. I could hear her yelling, with Jacob attempting to calm her. When she eventually left, Jacob came in to comfort me. He apologized for her actions and informed me that he would speak with her again so she could apologize to me as well when I arrived the following weekend. Sarah apologized and offered me a pitiful excuse, claiming that she needed to speak with Jacob urgently and so believed it would be good for her to come in. Jacob forcefully asked her not to bother us again, and she agreed sheepishly. Although this issue appeared to be remedied, it was not the only strange conduct she demonstrated towards Jacob. If Jacob and I differed on something, even something as trivial as movies, and Sarah was around, she would begin telling him that he should date someone with comparable likes, meaning that we were unsuitable for each other. Jacob would give her a condemning look, but she would simply smirk. Another episode was Sarah asking me awkward questions about my background in an attempt to delve into my life. Jacob and I had been open about our past since the beginning, but I didn't feel comfortable addressing it with his sister. Regardless of my thoughts, she would ask me questions like, "Why did your ex break up with you? Were you not suitable for him?" She would also make remarks like, "My brother's previous girlfriend was far more attractive than you." All of these queries and comments arose when she and I were alone. I began to suspect that she was trying to play a game with me, bringing me down. I initially kept my lips shut, but as the situation progressed, I had enough. One day, I responded to her taunting by stating I liked my ex-boyfriend's family better than Jacob's because he didn't have nosy, overbearing family members. Sarah was taken aback by my reply, which temporarily silenced her. Even though Sarah had a strange relationship with my husband, my mother-in-law was no exception. When I first entered Jacob's life, my mother-in-law ignored me, but once she discovered we were serious, she began acting as if I was attempting to steal her son away. She would purposefully ignore me at dinners and family gatherings as if I did not exist. Jacob saw this occasionally and tried to talk to her, but she never changed. My mother-in-law once referred to me as stuck-up and spoiled just because my parents put me in a private school while she was a public school teacher. I also know she tried to talk Jacob out of marrying me, telling him he should look for a better spouse. Fortunately, my spouse did not care about her view and proposed to me nonetheless. My mother-in-law and Sarah were shocked to learn that Jacob had proposed. Both contacted me, telling me that it was a horrible decision, and that because Jacob wouldn't listen to them, I should quit the relationship and return the ring. I found this quite strange and declined, stating that they were crossing a line by asking me to do something like that when I loved Jacob and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. When they realized they couldn't persuade me, my mother-in-law reluctantly changed her mind, telling me that I should strive to be the best wife for him and care for him in the same manner she did for years. I was rather offended, but I tried not to take her remarks too seriously. Sarah, on the other hand, accused me of being a gold digger and claimed her brother deserved someone with higher status. She even threatened to expose me before our wedding so Jacob would not marry me. Following this conversation, I immediately spoke with Jacob about everything. He was taken aback by how disrespectful they were towards me. He challenged them, but my mother-in-law and Sarah continued to believe that I was unsuitable for him. Jacob told me to disregard them, assuring me that he loved me regardless of their opinions. Despite his reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already chosen to pay for our wedding ourselves, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the cost, we politely declined. Despite Jacob's reassuring remarks, I felt horrible that his own family would not embrace me. Jacob and I had already planned to pay for our own wedding, so when my mother-in-law offered to cover half of the costs, we politely declined, with Jacob explaining how hard we had worked to save money specifically for this occasion. Instead of being happy for us, she became even more angry, and she began telling Jacob how sad she was that he no longer needed her. However, Jacob's father appeared to be quite pleased with us, unlike his sister and mother. His father was very calm and never had any issues with our connection. Since my mother-in-law continued to complain to Jacob, we made a compromise by telling her that we would love for her to organize the rehearsal dinner for us. She agreed, and we appreciated her generosity. However, when the wedding approached, events took an unexpected turn. The first instance came when Sarah invited herself to join us for supper, telling Jacob how much she missed him. Jacob and I were living on our own following our engagement, so we assumed she genuinely wanted to spend time with her brother. We agreed, and Jacob asked me directly if I was comfortable with having supper with her. I reluctantly consented, not wanting to be nasty to my soon-to-be sister-in-law while we were enjoying our dinner. Sarah abruptly began discussing how much she despised cheating partners, claiming that cheaters were nothing but useless pieces of trash. We stared at her, curious about where she was headed with this. Then, out of nowhere, she looked me directly in the eyes and asked how it felt to be a useless piece of trash. My brow furrowed in perplexity as Sarah began to rant, accusing me of having an affair with my co-worker Zach. Jacob, also perplexed, asked her what she meant by saying this. Sarah proudly hauled out photos of me and one of my co-workers, waving them around and claiming that she had caught me red-handed. I knew I'd never been unfaithful to Jacob, so I was curious as to why she assumed I was having an affair. Looking through the photos, they appeared to be entirely innocent. It's true that Zach and I were close co-workers, but only because we started at the same time and helped each other out when we made mistakes, so our manager wouldn't criticize us. Zach even had a girlfriend, which Jacob knew about. I don't have a lock on my phone, and I've always been open with Jacob about all of my colleagues. Sarah had turned these pleasant moments caught in photographs into something they were not evidence of a fictitious affair. In truth, they were far from it. Her false charges irritated me since it was obvious she was attempting to damage my reputation and disrupt my connection with Jacob. Before I could defend myself, Jacob, stunned and plainly upset, moved in to help. He questioned Sarah why she was following me around and photographing me with my co-workers in public places without their permission. When Sarah heard this, she began rationalizing her behavior, claiming she simply wanted to investigate me because I was not of their status and she was scared I was marrying Jacob to steal his money. Jacob told her unequivocally that her charges were false and that she was creating extra drama out of nothing. He tried to reason with her, telling her to stop spreading lies and attempting to destroy our relationship. But Sarah insisted that Jacob open his eyes to the obvious affair that was going on. I also tried to clarify that we were only co-workers, but Sarah insisted on her charges. As her charges grew more serious, the environment became strained. I had had enough and informed her that I was going to make a police report against her for illegally photographing and stalking me. Her look grew terrified as she inquired whether I was serious. I informed her I had all of the evidence she had purposely tracked me and took these images without my permission, attempting to slander me with ludicrous lies. Sarah stared at Jacob and then back at me, arguing that she did everything to protect her brother and that it wasn't a big deal. She began imploring Jacob to speak with me, worried that if I filed a complaint, it would jeopardize her profession and future. I strongly told her that she could only save herself at this time. Sarah inquired what I wanted. I assured her I wouldn't pursue the complaint if she kept away from my life. Sarah had no other option for escaping the situation at that point. She looked to her brother for support, but Jacob defended me, telling her that she should be grateful I was willing to let it go because what she had done was clearly wrong. Sarah reluctantly agreed to stay away from me, and we have not spoken since that day. Jacob still has a relationship with her, but she has never spoken to me again. The second incident occurred shortly before our wedding, at the rehearsal dinner. My mother-in-law, who had insisted on planning the meal, rebuffed our offer of assistance in any manner. She told us that she would take care of everything. However, when we arrived, it was evident that the preparations were far from what we had anticipated. The rehearsal dinner had plastic tablecloths on picnic tables and chilly Mexican food. My mother-in-law was upset throughout dinner, which marred the festive atmosphere. She drank excessively and began behaving inappropriately with the guests, repeatedly stating how she couldn't wait for the wedding to end and how stressful it had been, despite the fact that she had not contributed monetarily or assisted with the planning. Eventually, my father-in-law became irate and escorted her away. Sarah attempted to excuse her mother's actions, but my father-in-law refused to listen. As you might guess, the entire affair was a fiasco, and I began to worry that both my mother-in-law and Sarah would wreck the wedding the next day. That night, Jacob and I had our first disagreement. I informed him strongly that he needed to uninvite Sarah and his mother because, based on their actions, they would surely try to overshadow us at the wedding. My husband angrily protested, promising me that his father would be present and would not allow them to get away with it. Frustrated, I promised that if he didn't uninvite them, there would be no wedding the following day. Jacob was plainly taken aback by my demand, and even knowing how extreme I sounded, I was concerned about what they might do. I did not want to be embarrassed again in front of my family and friends on our wedding day. Jacob definitely lacked firm boundaries, but I hoped that this ultimatum would make him realize how much his family was interfering with our relationship. Thankfully, Jacob understood and made the proper decision. He called his father early in the morning to inform him that his mother and sister were uninvited. Phil didn't appear startled and promised Jacob that he'd make sure my mother-in-law and Sarah didn't show up there. Unexpectedly, shortly after our chat with Phil, my mother-in-law and Sarah began contacting Jacob constantly, apparently trying to persuade him to let them attend the wedding. However, Jacob forcefully told them that he did not feel comfortable having them there because of how they had treated me throughout our relationship. Hearing this, my mother-in-law began accusing me of being a terrible influence and interfering with her relationship with her son. Sarah attempted to argue with him, but Jacob was certain in his decision. I felt horrible that Phil couldn't attend our wedding because of his wife and children. I even felt sorry about issuing the ultimatum, but all of my remorse vanished when I discovered from some of Jacob's cousins that Sarah and my mother-in-law had intended to wear white dresses to our wedding. The cousins informed me that in their family WhatsApp group, which only had female members, Sarah had encouraged the others to wear white as well, stating there was no reason for the bride to be the only one. I was astounded by how low they would go just to hurt me. After knowing this, I was relieved they hadn't been invited. Jacob missed his family, but he could see where I was coming from. Overall, we had a lovely wedding, and no one tried to outdo us. Since that day, my mother-in-law and Sarah have stopped talking to me entirely, which I am absolutely okay with. They only invited Jacob around for dinner or special events, which didn't bother me at all. Phil, on the other hand, was always kind to me, and we stayed in touch. Over the years, Jacob and I painstakingly saved money and finally purchased a new home this year. It was our first home, and we were overjoyed to own something so meaningful. Jacob's parents and Sarah did come to visit for a modest housewarming celebration, but I went to see my parents and spent time with my family instead. Now to the major point. My mother-in-law contacted me unexpectedly last month. This was really surprising because Mom and I hadn't spoken since the day I married Jacob. Surprisingly, she casually inquired about my well-being and life circumstances. I was taken aback by her unexpected interest, but I responded pleasantly. Then she questioned how it felt to live in such a spacious house with only Jacob and myself. Her remark stung since Jacob and I had been trying to conceive for a long time, but were unable to do so owing to infertility concerns. Jacob and I had mourned the thought of never having children, but we gradually accepted it. When I first got the news, I informed Jacob that if he wanted to marry someone else and have children, he could divorce me. But Jacob had always stayed by me, assuring me that it was fine to be childless as long as we had each other. Our families were aware of this, so my mother-in-law's comment was very painful. She then told me Sarah was pregnant again. I was astonished because this would be her 6th child. Jacob had told me how her husband was unemployed and did not believe in using contraception, which resulted in these accidental pregnancies. Sarah's boyfriend was the embodiment of laziness, doing nothing around the house to aid her or the kids. I've heard from Jacob that he treats Sarah like a personal maid. He never pays any bills in the house. Sarah works many part-time jobs while he spends the entire day gaming. Regardless of how much everyone has talked to her, Sarah never breaks up with him. My mother-in-law then went on to add that because Sarah could no longer afford to work during her pregnancy, she thought Jacob and I should give up our apartment because it was too big for a childless couple like us. I was caught aback by her demand and struggled to find words. I inquired whether she was joking, but my mother-in-law responded that she was serious, that Sarah and her husband deserved to live in a larger house. However, because she did not have enough space in her own home to accommodate them, she invited them to come in with us. The weight of her news weighed in the air as I fought to keep my composure in the midst of the emotional storm. I emphasized to her that this was our house, which we were still paying for, and the idea of someone else moving in without our permission was intrusive and ludicrous. However, my mother-in-law said that she had already spoken with Jacob, who had allegedly consented to this. This was strange, because Jacob and I were always open with each other, and I knew he would have told me if he had agreed to let his sister and her family stay with us. I firmly told my mother-in-law that because the house belonged to both me and Jacob, He couldn't grant permission without my agreement. No one was allowed to reside here unless both of us agreed to reach a solution. I told her that I would be pleased to accommodate Sarah and her husband for a few days if they wished, but that they could not stay permanently. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, began yelling, arguing that as a responsible daughter-in-law, I was required to make room for Sarah and her husband. She also assured me that if I complied with her demands, all previous troubles would be forgiven. In rage, I cynically said, "Sure, I'll be pleased to let them take our place, but you see, we're still paying for it, and I'm confident that if Sarah and her husband move in, they will not assist with the mortgage or bills. So how about you take some responsibility and contribute to their living expenses? I'd be grateful if you could just cover the mortgage and we manage the rest, of course, with only one job. You'll definitely need a second one to cover the home payments. Please let me know when you intend to get that second job." Hearing this, my mother-in-law exploded in wrath, shouting and voicing her dissatisfaction. She said it was crazy of me to want her to pay the mortgage, and I responded that it was equally ridiculous for her to expect us to care for Sarah's family and allow them to move in. This infuriated her even more, and she continued to yell while I smiled with satisfaction. She eventually disconnected the call when she saw I wouldn't give in to her demands. Soon after, Sarah called and yelled at me for daring to ask her mother to pay our mortgage. She went on to add that she had always known I was a gold digger. I informed her that she was the gold digger attempting to live with us without contributing. I added that if she wanted to know who the true gold digger was, she could look at her own partner, who did nothing to assist her. This appeared to silence her. I firmly told Sarah that she could argue with me all she wanted, but I would never let her family into our home unless they agreed to help with the mortgage. She accused me of being cruel and putting money before family. The tables had turned, and I was relieved at the thought of sticking up for myself and refusing to back down, taking control of my home. However, I feel a little awful thinking about my ex-husband, and I'm here on Reddit wondering if what I've done makes me the villain. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who has expressed their support. To answer the most crucial question that everyone keeps asking, why would my mother-in-law demand such a stupid thing of us? It's because she has always been so entitled. Clearly, my husband has tolerated this charade for far too long, and he and I need to sit down and have a serious discussion about it. It's heartbreaking how my mother-in-law can lie about her own kid in order to get her way. My sister-in-law is a pawn in her game, doing whatever her mother wishes because my mother-in-law has always favored my husband. Sarah simply listens to what her mother says in the hopes of garnering favor as well. In this situation, Sarah stood to benefit because she could rely on us to pay her expenses and care for her children while her useless husband did nothing. I'm waiting for my spouse to return from his business trip so we can discuss. I do not want to discuss this over the phone since it is too important. Update 2. It's been 3 days since I last updated. As I indicated earlier, I was waiting for my husband to return. When he returned, we finally sat down and talked. I told him how his mother had called and demanded that we give up our house to his sister and her family. Jacob was definitely taken aback, so I gave him the whole story journey. His mother had only told him that his sister was pregnant. That was all he knew about the situation, and he had no idea his mother would make such unreasonable demands. I informed him forcefully that I expected him to speak with his mother and deal with the matter because I couldn't bear his family anymore. He agreed. Jacob confronted his mother and questioned why she had lied to me about him. When caught red-handed, my mother-in-law attempted to backtrack, claiming that she had not actually lied. She said that she knew Jacob would have no objections to his sister staying with us, so she took matters into her own hands and approached me personally. Jacob stopped her off and questioned why she thought he would be fine with Sarah and her entire family coming in. My mother-in-law explained that because Jacob and Sarah were close, he would naturally want to support her by allowing her family to come in. Hearing this, I closed my eyes in disgust but remained silent, allowing Jacob to handle his mother. Jacob then firmly told her that he was not going to let Sarah, her unemployed husband, and their 6 children move in with us. He also stated that she had no authority to compel us to take care of them. My mother-in-law started yelling, stating Sarah desperately needed aid at this time, but Jacob informed her it was not our job, and if she wanted to help, she could care for Sarah herself. My mother-in-law then said that Phil didn't want them in their small house, although we lived in a larger house and could easily help out. She even had the audacity to suggest that, since I was childless, assisting Sarah's children would make me feel fulfilled. My eyes widened with surprise, but for the first time, I noticed Jacob's face shift color. He raged at her, stating she had no right to say such rude things about me and couldn't use it to compel me to care for Sarah's children. Jacob went on to say that Phil didn't want anything to do with Sarah since she had turned into a child-birthing machine and that he was over both of them. My mother-in-law tried to backtrack again, but Jacob would not have it. He informed her that he had done his best to keep a positive connection with them, even after they had repeatedly disrespected me, but he couldn't take it any longer. My mother-in-law begged him, but Jacob assured her that this was our home and I was his wife. Anyone that offended me disrespected him as well, and they did not deserve to be in his life. Jacob ended the call with those final words. Since then, he has not spoken with Sarah or his mother. Phil summoned Jacob to speak, and after hearing the entire story, he understood why Jacob had made such a severe move. Phil apologized to me on behalf of his wife, but I informed him that it was not his responsibility. Update 3. It has been an interesting 2 weeks. A lot of people suggested that I install cameras around our house in case my mother-in-law and Sarah wanted to show up and cause a commotion. So, I purchased several cameras online and installed them. As luck would have it, they showed up last weekend, banging on my door while I was alone at home. When I saw them through the camera, I quickly called Jacob, who told me he was on his way. I answered the door, and there they were, my mother-in-law and Sarah, both furious. They requested that I let them in, but I refused and told them that if they had anything to say, they could do so from the outside. My mother-in-law began ranting at me, accusing me of being callous, greedy, and selfish. I politely informed her that this was our home and they had no right to enter uninvited. She continued her tirade, unaware that the cameras were recording every moment. I reminded her of our prior chat, emphasizing that I would not give up our house for Sarah and her family, and that if she had anything else to say, she could wait for Jacob's return. Sarah then began yelling, accusing me of breaking up the family for no reason, being a gold digger, and attempting to take her brother away from them. I informed them that everything they said was being recorded and that I would use the footage to obtain a restraining order if necessary. Their eyes widened in surprise as my mother-in-law exclaimed that I wouldn't dare to do that. I smirked and informed her that if they did not leave the property immediately, they would receive a legal notice very soon. This worried them, and Sarah tried to convince me that I was overreacting, saying that it wasn't a big problem. Fortunately, Jacob came at that exact moment. He approached them casually, asking what they were doing. My mother-in-law raced to hug him, but he resisted and firmly demanded why they had come. Sarah stated that I was attempting to control his life by separating him from them and that they had come to confront me. Jacob reiterated that it was his decision to avoid contact and that he did not want anything to do with either of them. My mother-in-law begged for forgiveness, but Jacob merely told them to leave the property or he would call the cops. They were visibly taken aback, apparently not anticipating this reaction from him. Jacob went on to say that if they ever came to our house again, we would contact the police and have them removed forcibly. They fled, devastated, but Jacob no longer cared. I was relieved that my spouse had finally spoken up for me. Jacob has now spoken with Phil, who was as surprised as we were that my mother-in-law and Sarah had gone behind his back to show up unexpectedly. Phil informed us that we were correct not to let them in and expressed disgust with their behavior. With Jacob being so stern about kicking them out, I doubt they'll dare to return to our property. If they do, I will contact a lawyer right away. I am relieved that my husband has finally learned how toxic his family is, and I hope this is my final update. I'm ready to move on from this circumstance and continue our lives peacefully. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Am I the expletive for deciding to divorce after discovering that my wife had a tattoo of another man's name? While I was away, my wife of 4 years got a tattoo recently with her best friend, who has a very aggressive type of bone cancer. She didn't discuss it with me at all, just did it while I was on a training mission. I came home Monday morning to her with his name tatted on her neck with a Pokemon. I have not returned home since I saw it. I have been sleeping in the barracks. I am honestly thinking about just filing for divorce. Am I wrong? Edit. I have heard from a few of my neighbors that she basically moved him in for the 6 weeks I was away on a training mission and left a few days before I returned. She is refusing to even discuss it. All she keeps saying is it has nothing to do with me and her. Update 1. She was served divorce papers yesterday at our previous home together. She thought it would be a good idea to involve both our families without giving them a reason or context. I filed for divorce after I got home from my last training mission. So, as the parents called, I told them about the tattoo and her moving him in while I was gone and let them deal with her. Relevant comments. Comment 1. What did you say to her when you first saw it? And how did she react to you? OP. I asked her what she did, and she said, I got a Pokemon tattoo, and showed me. I saw his name on her neck, and I just went quiet, picked up my bags, and walked back on base, went and saw my CO and had a drink with him. Comment 2. If my partner puts any other name on his body than my kids, his family's, or mine, it's a problem. They could have done a tattoo without a name and on a place that isn't so out in the open. The tattoo in itself isn't an issue, but the name and place are. OP. Exactly. It hurts that she turned me down last year about getting matching tattoos to just get one with her Pokemon Go buddy. But it's not the tattoo. It's the complete disrespect and disregard. It's a constant symbol. Update 2. Got all my ducks in a row, as they say. Sat down and spoke with my future ex-wife. She honestly expects me to just step aside and let her play house with her friend, pause our marriage, wait till they are done, then continue our life together like nothing happened. I can't live with her plan, so I'm getting divorced. Wasted nearly 6 years on her already, not wasting any more of my life on her. I'll be in my new duty station by the end of June, a fresh start, I hope, and put all this behind me. Relevant comments. How has his wife tried to reconcile? Oh, she has been endlessly trying to just communicate with me. After she failed to contact me personally, she went to our parents and siblings. When that failed, she started contacting friends and people in my unit, spouses of people in my unit. She is absolutely relentless. And it's always the same about how this is just temporary because he is not long for this earth, and I would do the same thing for a terminally sick friend. What does her family say about everything? Oh no. No, they are not at all pleased. At first, her parents came at me because all she told them was I left her out of the blue after returning from a training mission. I told the truth about how she got a neck tattoo with her friend's name and had him living in our house while I was on my training mission. Update 3. This morning, my commanding officer pulled me from a training flight to inform me of my wife's death and got me on a flight back to North Carolina. I should arrive at my parents' house in about 8 hours. A month ago, I filed for divorce, changed duty stations, and cut her completely out of my life. I didn't want to hear how this thing with her friend James was temporary and how our marriage would go back to normal after he passed. I am not suicidal or anything like that, but I am profoundly saddened. I keep thinking how 6 months ago we were happy and in love, and now she took her own life when I just didn't accept what she was doing for a friend who was dying from cancer. I am riddled with self-doubt and blaming myself for her actions. Thinking about everything and our parents having been friends for decades, she is now dead in the water, another victim of her delusion. I know these were all her choices, but still feel guilty for her death. I don't know if hell is real or not, but I hope James ends up there for what he has caused. Update 4. Had a meeting with the funeral home today. She already set most everything up and paid for it a little over a week ago. We are having a memorial service at my in-laws' house on Wednesday. Her ashes will need to be picked up in a few days. I have a grief counseling session on Friday morning. Relevant comments. Comment 1. I'm sorry for your loss. Did she ever admit to cheating? I might have missed it. OAP. A week or so ago. My mother called me and confirmed she was almost 3 months pregnant, so that confirmed she was sleeping with him when I was away for 6 weeks. Comment 2. Wait a sec. She was taking care of a friend with cancer, and you lost your expletive over it, causing a divorce, and that plunged her probably into a depression, and she took her life. Sounds like you were the problem here. Not so much her. OAP. Not exactly. She hit the pause button on our marriage so she could play house with him while I was on a training mission in California without informing me, was pregnant with his child when I came back, and wasn't going to tell me. If it wasn't for the stupid tattoo she got with his name, I might have fallen for it and slept with her, and she would have had me raise his child as my own. Comment 3. Oh, what a jerk. I'm so sorry. Now I think your wife committed suicide to join him in the other life. Probably both went to hell for their selfishness. OAP. I'm not sure if he has passed or not. Pretty much left and crawled under a rock for the last few weeks. Comment 4. I was wondering if James was still alive. Did you say how your wife, how do I ask without sounding rude, killed herself? OAP. Found out she wrote 10 letters to different people, including me. Then she emptied the medicine cabinet while her family was out. They came home, and she was in her bed and had passed away. Comment 5. What was the nature of her relationship with him? Was she giving him palliative care or having an affair with him? OAP. He was still active, as in up and around. Hell, as of last week, he was still working at the card shop, I was told. So, we'll say an affair. _. Now to the next story. Am I the expletive for refusing to share my only gluten-free plate with a pregnant friend despite her cravings and emotional pleas at breakfast? I recently found out I have a gluten allergy, which explains all of the stomach pains and aches I've had when trying to eat anything my whole life. Since finding out about the allergy, I've been making sure to avoid foods that contain even trace amounts of gluten because even a small amount causes indigestion and, in some cases, vomiting. I was invited out to breakfast with some of my friends, and I let them know of the allergy so we could pick somewhere that actually had food I could eat. The place we settled on is a really high-end breakfast restaurant that has a whole separate kitchen or at least a section of the kitchen for preparing their food without gluten, which was a lifesaver since, had that not been the case, I would have needed to skip the restaurant entirely. Included among my friends was a couple who recently got pregnant. We can call them Emma and Vaya. Vaya is the one who is pregnant and said she wouldn't be having much since she wasn't feeling very well due to the morning sickness. Everyone understood and offered to let her just have a few bites off their plates so she could still have something nice, even if it was just a little. I didn't agree to this, though, since if they were going to be sharing with each other, I couldn't take part. I explained myself, not feeling okay sharing since I'd just be giving food without getting any, and all my friends seemed to completely understand, as well as agree that was very fair. When the food came out, everyone was sharing and having a good time. Vaya asked if she could have a bite of my food, and I politely declined sharing since I couldn't grab a different bite from anyone else. Vaya told me her pregnancy cravings were kicking in, and all she was asking for was a couple of bites, so I should have just given that to her. I told her again I'd already explained I didn't want to share since my food was all I had. Emma told me I could just give her half and order more food if I wasn't satisfied with the amount left, and I again told them no. The gluten-free options were quite a bit more expensive than what they were eating, and paying for 2 plates just so Vaya could have half my food didn't seem fair. Vaya then told me just because I was on a diet didn't mean I could be selfish and everyone else had no issues sharing. Thankfully, the rest of the people sitting there did help me stand up for myself and told Vaya I'd already explained I wouldn't be sharing since no one could share back. While I'd ordered an egg scramble and some gluten-free pancakes, everyone else had normal pancakes, French toast, avocado toast, and other things I just couldn't eat. Vaya wasn't satisfied with their and my justification for why she couldn't have any of my food. She went on and on about how I'd turned the whole table against her and shamed her for being pregnant and hungry. I told her if she'd gotten her appetite back, she could always order herself a plate, so she didn't need to rely on anyone sharing their food. Vaya went off at this and told me about all the things she's needed to pay for in preparation for her and Emma's baby. She told me I was being selfish and heartless because I didn't want to give her half my plate when I could afford to do so. This is where I may be the a-hole, because I told Vaya she chose to get pregnant, and she chose to go through all of the issues that come with it. I didn't choose to have a gluten allergy, and I didn't want to go hungry because she wanted to eat off everyone else for free. Vaya started ugly crying, and everyone tried to calm her down, but she and Emma ended up just leaving without paying their portion of the bill. No one blamed me since I was right, but Emma sent me a message telling me could have just said no and left it at that instead of embarrassing Vaya in front of all her friends. I'm starting to feel very guilty. I didn't want either of them to leave. I just wanted her to stop trying to leverage her pregnancy against me a way to get the only food I could eat. Aita. ETA. Trying to answer some of the most asked questions. Yes, Emma did get a plate. She claimed it was too sweet for Vaya and said she should grab a less sweet bite of everyone else's plate. The reason it went from 1 bite to half my food, which was 1 pancake of my 2, was because she assumed my food was less sweet due to being gluten-free. I don't think that's the case, but that was just her logic. The group agreed we wouldn't be spending as much time with either Emma or Vaya ever since getting married. The two of their bitchiness aspects have combined and multiplied. We also did send them a Venmo request for their part of the bill. They've been told they can either pay the bill, or they can never come out to eat with us again. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.